I think that we're all suffering from multiple personality disorder. Actually, I think it's natural that we do have a lot of different subpersonalities and archetypes that kind of run the show. There basically is a crowd inside of every one of us. And finding that voice of your higher self, I think, leads you to your true north.
Welcome to True North Alignment. There becomes a point where strategy is no longer the deciding factor. What matters most is the state that you're building from, for this shapes every decision, every move, and every result. When you're aligned, things work, and when you're not, they don't. This is where purpose becomes inevitable. I'm Keith Hodge. Let's begin. Welcome back to True North Alignment, where purpose becomes inevitable. Today, our guest is Dr. LJ Rose from Florida, and she runs an academy on natural wellness. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me, Keith.
What would you say is your definition of living from True North?
Well, I think it's identifying what your passion and purpose might be and taking the steps to fulfill that.
And you spend a long time in the world of therapy, self-help, wellness, and teaching others how to go through transformation. From your perspective, what feels like the most disconnecting for people from their true north? What shows up for them when they are disconnected from this state of being?
I think that we're all suffering from multiple personality disorder. Actually, I think it's natural that we do have a lot of different subpersonalities and archetypes that kind of run the show. And I think that most people don't realize that. And they get driven by the egoic self, the negative ego. They're not able to distinguish. They're not doing enough work with themselves to be able to understand that there basically is a crowd inside of every one of us. And finding that voice of your higher self, I think, leads you to your true north.
So for someone that is in that egoic state, as you call it, how do they recognize that they're in that state rather than something else?
I think if thoughts in your mind tend to bring you down, tend to make you feel like you're unworthy or less than, you can be sure that that's coming from the egoic self, because I believe that we all are born with a special purpose, and it's a matter of learning to discern what voice is really pumping you up and what is pulling you down.
Absolutely. Yeah. For me, the state of true north is like we feel joy and gratitude and ease, and there's flow. Like a lot of people occasionally experience flow in their life and then think it's something magical that, they're not quite sure how to achieve it, but it's there when we're not saturated by these more heavy states of being. And I would say that it's very difficult for someone that's got a lot of past thoughts, as you put them, or emotions, to be able to understand what is possible in terms of purpose and living from this state. Could you speak into that topic, please?
Well, I think it's dividing the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. But my specialty, Keith, has always been helping adults heal from childhood trauma. That's kind of what put me on the map. I was an international trainer, training in Jungian psychology, subconscious dynamics, and regression hypnotherapy. The idea of going back, it's abreaction catharsis, going back to what traumatized us. Honestly, it's not what happened to us in our childhood, it's how we interpreted it. It's what we told ourselves about ourselves or life in general. Once you have a belief system set in place, then attitudes are going to flow from that belief system, feelings, thoughts, actions, and eventually you're going to kind of keep recreating a reality that is a projection of that negative belief system. So a lot of the work that I've done and that we're training our coaches and therapists at the academy is to help create a new paradigm and understand that that training does not really reflect you. It just reflects who you were at that given time in your life.
And how do you find that you best take people back to the moment that the emotion and the belief formed?
I think hypnotherapy is a really powerful tool and one that people should not in any way be afraid of. because it's a very natural state. It's a state we go in and out of about a dozen times a day. For instance, if you're driving to get to your studio and you don't remember the last few blocks or miles, that is a hypnotic state. If you get very engrossed in watching something or reading something and somebody startles you, that is also very much a hypnotic state. So it's utilizing these altered states of consciousness. And you can also recreate altered states of consciousness through certain psychedelics, through certain experiences like drumming. And in that altered state, if your therapist or guide knows what they're doing, they're going to be able to help you identify not just what happened, but how you communicated that to yourself.
When you take someone into the unconscious mind, how do you know that what they access is the true root rather than something along the timeline of the symptom?
Because I'm a pioneer in the field of hypnosis since the mid to late 80s and have taught it all over the world, there was a few years there that this whole concept of false memory came up, and you don't hear much about it. And I think that has to do more with the therapist making implications because there are so many different ways to be traumatized. It's not just all sexual abuse. Although I worked in the Hispanic community in California for many years, and sadly, statistically, that happened a lot. And then I worked in Japan for a dozen years, and you didn't see the sexual abuse as much as the emotional and physical abuse. So again, it's not what happened, it's what we told ourselves. So the way that we do abreaction catharsis is to encourage the person to relive the experience, but it's never going to be with that kind of traumatic feeling of being all alone and being scared because we're there with them. Now, over the years, because I'm not really seeing, I train therapists and coaches now, and I'm not really doing as much one on one. But one of the benefits that we have in the academy, because we're in adult education and people get into their heads and they might start out really positive and with a lot of energy and then kind of get into their headspace that's telling them that you're never going to be a good coach. You'll never be able to do this. And so, in addition to having every student has a mentor through the program, I also try to have a meet and greet with everybody along the way. And it means I'm really busy, but I enjoy it because I want them to have the confidence that if they're getting into their own head, that we can have a counseling session. I'm sometimes now able to do that without even needing the trance state. I think when you really validate somebody and you help them to know that they're seen, and a lot of times I'm doing this on the phone or through Zoom, they're opening in a way that is similar to hypnosis. There's rapport. Whenever there's rapport in that kind of situation, the subconscious is open. Again, there's no damage that you can do to somebody. That is really kind of Hollywood. That's the interpretation of hypnosis that has come through bad movies or stage shows where they just kind of ridicule the scientific part of it. But once you kind of can get into what the person might have told themselves about themselves or life or the world, it's up for change. And when that's changed, kind of what surrounds you in your headspace changes at the same time. And a person develops what I think is probably the most important trait that we need, which is self-worth, because everything comes from having a good, solid self-worth. And that's not 100% of the time. It just needs to be around enough so that you can interpret the true north voice, which is telling you a way to go with your life that's going to bring you a lot more joy.
Was there a moment in your own personal journey where wellness stopped being a concept and became something lived for you?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think you always teach what you need to learn. And I think in many ways, my parents were both Holocaust survivors, and they came from a generation that was very stoic, and they just didn't want to talk about it. They were they were told you're in a safe place now. Nobody wants to hear it. It's negative, and so they buried it. And maybe indirectly, I wanted to help them, but they wound up not being the most gifted at parenting. I think they were both really brilliant people, very cultured, but they didn't really understand the nature, the human nature, and the negative things that they could say and do that would impact. And so it was not something that it's not something you really can do on yourself though, Keith, because the subconscious mind is a very emotional mind. And when you have the therapist on the other side, logic can be applied, and that's like pouring in this beautiful healing balm. So I had to be very creative with ways to find out that the things that I believed about myself, that I was unworthy, that I was bad, that I didn't deserve good things, I had to kind of really work with myself for many years to get past that. And we all do. I mean, there's very few people were gifted with a truly healthy and happy childhood.
I agree. Most people have quite a lot to work through, even when it is a so-called good childhood. So, as you say, it's the interpretation of what we went through that causes the disconnection.
Well, even a good childhood could mean that your parents repressed or suppressed their own trauma. For instance, my father in law, I always admired him because he had had a very difficult childhood, but he was very good at letting my husband know that he was loved. And I do think that there's generational trauma. And now they're saying it can go back as far as 10 generations. Some believe it's infinite. And so a good childhood doesn't necessarily mean that you're not carrying this generational chain behind you. For instance, there was a show that came out last year from the UK that was really popular. I don't Did you ever see Adolescence? It was a mini series. I don't know if it was based on a true story, but he was a kid. I don't think he was more than 12 or 13, and he in cold blood beat a girl to death. And it was devastating for his family. And as I watched it, I think it was a four-part series, I could see all of the generational trauma that the parents had come through. Now, the parents were good parents. They loved their son, but he was carrying a lot of the rage that they had never worked out inside of themselves. And I wrote a whole article for Brains Magazine. In fact, if you want, I can provide that for you for your show notes. I'll send you the link to that article. Another thing that really damages children is hypocrisy. I wrote another article for Huffington Post called The Second Most Damaging Thing You Can Do to Your Children. And in the first paragraph, I said, I'm not being coy. If you want to know the first most damaging thing, it's trauma, abuse of any sort is a soul killer. But I think that children know a lot more than they know that they know, or that their parents know that they know. And even though they can't articulate it, they feel things. And it is alarming. And then we live in this very Judeo Christian Islamic upbringing where you're taught that the number one thing is you have to honor your parents. And if you start to judge them, even internally, and then that layer jumps on that's like, oh, I'm judging my parents. And then another layer of anger. But, why are they allowed to lie to me? Why is it do as I say and not as I do? And so we're so complicated, Keith. I mean, there's so many layers. And sometimes as a therapist, that's what you need to work with people is just getting through those layers of, I think they're faulty premises that kind of dictate what we're doing in our lifetimes. And when you can get to that faulty premise and you can own it and you can forgive others and forgive yourself, then you're able to move into the kind of position where the true north might become more apparent to you.
Yeah, in my academy, we work with ancestral healing, amongst other things. And the question I
Yeah.
have for you is, like, how do you know where the true root is? I know you say there's interpretation and it's the story you're working with. In my experience, it's when we face the origin of the emotion fully in a way that we never had. Like healing all comes from, there's a moment of emotional experience that the child or the ancestor, wherever the origin lies, cannot be with. And they disconnect from that. They protect themselves. And it's that protection that we see in the
Mhm.
impacts in their life that they come into our clinics with. And so for me, the whole symptom doesn't actually shift until we've got to the origin. If we go to something, say 5 years later, that's still a big moment in their life, it won't fully shift. Did you agree with this? And if so, how do you help your clients to get back to that original moment?
I don't think that there's necessarily one original moment. I think there might be a string of them. Now, if somebody was severely abused in any of the ways that I suggested, that can be a causation, an original moment. But I've worked with people that we knew right off the bat that they had been, for instance, sexually abused, because I am fluent in Spanish and worked for many years with Hispanics. But something else really shows up. In my first regression, I do it in a very indirect way. Even if I know that they went through abuse, I'd rather let the subconscious know where it needs to go, where it's hurting. Or sometimes it's gentle to have them go through things that were not the gangbuster type of trauma that we know happened to them. And so it could be something that seems a lot less traumatic or bad, so to speak. And that might even be bothering them because it was something that was not known consciously. If you know you were abused and you know it consciously, you can work on that in many different ways. But a lot of times, what comes up in the subconscious is something that you did not remember. Like, that's what finally happened for me, is that I gave myself a post hypnotic suggestion to find out why there was a certain behavioral pattern that I couldn't seem to get past. And then just one day, out of the blue, it occurred to me, and it was something that I did not remember, but it went so deep into me. And that was when I think a lot of patterns started to shift and change in my life.
That's fantastic that you found a way to bring that out of yourself. Yeah, good.
It wasn't easy. It's very hard to be your own therapist. I do need to say that.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you see it as something that completes, or is it an ongoing process of therapizing oneself?
I think change is a process. It's not an event. I'm later in life now and I'm still changing and still it came up about a month ago. This whole piece about deservedness came up for me. Now, I've had a lot of accomplishments in my life. I live a pretty happy life, successful life, but there was a whole piece, something that I was trying to make happen that wasn't happening. And I realized that I had a very big piece around not deserving it. Again, change is lifetime. I mean, we shouldn't look at the idea that, oh, I'm going to be perfect or I'm going to be all better or that I'm taking that 180-degree turn, because it also, a lot of it has to do with where you are in your life. There are stages in life that for instance, Jung, and I am a Jungian, said that you don't even hit true adulthood until you're 35 years old. And in astrology, for instance, there's something called the Saturn return, which is this whole kind of archetypal, it comes up about 28 and a half to 31. And it's this archetypal movement into adulthood. Do you grow up or do you just grow old type of thing?
For someone that may be sitting here thinking, I don't know if I grew up, what would you say to them?
In some ways, it's good not to completely grow up because I think it keeps you young, it keeps you excited, it keeps you always growing and learning. I think if you're being ruled by fear, there's a good chance that you're still very much dominated by traumatic experiences that are not allowing you more of a, rather than saying growing up, really maturing emotionally, gaining that emotional intelligence.
Yeah. So when you say growing up, it's becoming emotionally intelligent and understanding yourself on a deeper level of consciousness.
Becoming resilient as well, being able to face challenges without tumbling. Sometimes we take giant steps forward and we're going to take a few tumbles backwards, and that's totally fine because, again, change also is not like a single file line that we go on either. So, resilience is really important because you're going to be tested by that higher aspect of yourself. We call that the I am presence in our spiritual wellness life coaching program, or the higher self. Many people call it the divine spark, the Atman. I mean, there's many ways to call it. And I think the more that you are open and willing, and that means willing to own your stuff, the more that you're going to take those giant leaps forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. And then in terms of purpose, would you say that your purpose has become inevitable?
Well, I knew always that I wanted to do something in healing. I wanted to be a healer. Now, I lived in Southern California for a lot of years, and I know that there are a lot of people that can be very airy-fairy in the metaphysical world, so we're very much about grounded spirituality. So I think it's just coming to a recognition, like I did, that I think I was a good therapist. I think I am a good therapist, but I think where I really shine, what brings me the most joy in my life is that position of mentoring and teaching and creating modalities that can, like the hypnopotential modality, that can help people move a little faster. I went into hypnotherapy in the middle of my working on my doctorate. I was going to complete my counseling psychologist PhD and then go on and do another 10 years to be a Jungian psychoanalyst. And at the time I was working in the Hispanic community, and it occurred to me most people don't have that luxury of time and money to spend on psychoanalysis, which can get a little narcissistic over the years because it's a little too much self internal focusing. And so I really like the types of modalities that can take people. It's almost like if you think of the keto diet, which, because we have health coaching and I specifically healed myself of an autoimmune disorder by changing my lifestyle, we look at all these lifestyles. So keto, I think over a long time is maybe not the healthiest, but let's say if you're going to your reunion or it's your daughter's wedding or something, that you want to lose a good 15 to 20 pounds. Naturally, I'm in the United States, so I know that better than kilos. It gives you that leap so that maybe you can make better choices. And that's what I'm saying also with therapy. If you can help a person make enough of a leap so that they won't easily backtrack, then I think that you've done them a tremendous service. But I've never considered myself, Keith, to be the alpha and the omega of anybody's healing process. Because again, maybe they always come to us. I think our academy tends to attract a more awakened person, whether they're studying health coaching, medical cannabis coaching, nature therapy. We have a commonality of purpose. We're compassionate empaths who want to make a difference in the world. And so I think that I've always told them, for instance, they come to me, I don't think they're at letter A, maybe I'm taking them from G to L, and then they're gonna go on and continue their journey, hopefully continue their journey.
Is there anything in your purpose that is still calling you that's yet to be manifested?
Yes, absolutely. I've written nonfiction, but I've always wanted to write the kind of fictional book, like there's a book called 2150 AD or The Mists of Avalon, a historical metaphysical fiction. And I've been working on one that's kind of a book within a book within a book. I'd also, because we are one of our most popular courses right now, in fact, the co-creator and mentor is in London. He's Simon. It's the neurodivergence life coaching because we really need a world that's more neuroaffirming. I think that I would really like to explore. I'm neurotypical, but I'm fascinated by neurodivergence because I really believe that they're almost simultaneously occupying another dimension. And so I'd like to explore the idea of seeing how hypnotherapy could or should be adapted to the neurodivergent brain.
hmm Fascinating. And what I'm really fascinated about is when purpose is inevitable. For example, like my moonshot, you could call it, is for a world of trauma-free children, where children have the opportunity to face emotion from a very young age
Right.
and to learn emotional regulation and then become healthy leaders that can transform our world. And I see that it's not now that I do this. So having, it sounds like, manifested a number of purposes and you having one remaining. How does someone hold a big vision like that and to know when it's the moment to act on it?
Well, I think you would just know, but I think it's important to take those stepping stones along the way. I think it's good to dream big, but even getting to a big dream does take proactive steps. And being present and learning at every stage along the way is important. And I mean, I'm not 100% sure I know who I want to be when I grow up, though that might not be my ultimate purpose. So I do really enjoy creating these therapists and coaches because I know they're going out into the world and they're going to make a difference in the world. Emotional dysregulation is everywhere. I would say the United States is probably right now, I mean, we're all living in such a chaos right now, and everybody is emotionally dysregulated. So I love that you said that, Keith, because I think that teaching children different ways to become emotionally regulated, to get out of that automatic amygdala hijacking or neural hijacking and teach them, how to get back into a parasympathetic non-fight or flight mode. And I think it's important for them to understand their multiplicity of selves too. And a lot of that comes from being able to sit and be quiet with yourself, not stop thinking. That's what people think that meditation is. It's just discernment. What's coming from a place in me that supports my true north or who I ultimately am meant to be, and what's coming from that lower voice that's trying to always keep me below the level that I believe that I was born to live.
Dr. LG, I've loved this conversation. Sounds like you're doing some incredible work out there
Thank
in the
you.
US and the world. Thank you so much for joining our podcast today. If anyone
Thank you.
would like to reach out to you that's listening, what's the best way?
The Natural Wellness Academy is .org, so naturalwellnessacademy.org. You can reach me personally through either the support email that's there, or I think one will come directly to me if you put Dr. LJ without any punctuation at naturalwellnessacademy.org.
So there you go, guys. If you want to reach out to Dr. LJ, you can access her there. Thank you for being on the True North Alignment podcast. I will see you next time. Thank you for being here. Take a moment. Where are you in alignment? Because in True North, nothing underneath your actions distorts them. And from that place, purpose becomes inevitable. See you next time.